WQAD News 8, this is WQAD This Week.
Good morning. It's Sunday, January 8th. Thank you for joining us for News 8 This Week. I'm Jon Diaz. The 2023 Iowa legislative session begins tomorrow. Iowa lawmakers will reconvene at the State House to gavel in the 2023 session. This week, we sat down with Mary Sugden, political reporter for our sister station in Iowa's capital city, who spoke with party leaders to get a sense of what lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are pushing for and how there are more than a few new faces in the legislature. And Mary joining us now. Mary, so good to see you again. Appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, thanks so much for having me.
Want to talk about first, just we're going into this new session. What does the legislature look like? How does it look maybe a little bit different than it did last year?
I think what you can look at for the key thing that's different from last year is there are quite a few freshman legislators, new legislators that are in both chambers. The clearest example of that is if you look at the House, there are 39 new members out of the 100. I believe 24 are Republicans, 15 are Democrats. You're looking like a third and a half of each of those caucuses. So a lot of fresh faces, which in talking with some of the leadership, they're excited by that. That's a lot of new perspectives and new ideas, and they think those legislators might look at things differently than maybe some other veteran legislators would. But at the same time, you've lost some of that experience, some of that wisdom when it comes to how things work in the state house. So I think we can expect some new voices and some new perspectives when we look at both of those chambers this year.
And why do you get a sense that that happened? Was that simply just a matter of folks retiring and kind of moving on to something else, or was that really just shifts in what the voters and who the voters wanted to see?
I think, part of that is due to exactly what you're saying there at the end, part of the change in maybe voters, seeing what they want, but a big piece of that and really kind of what changes the game this year is we had redistricting, back in 2021. So a lot of these districts, kind of shifted and moved. And so you're seeing, maybe representatives in areas that you wouldn't have before. We know of a few legislators that, changed from one chamber to the other because maybe they knew the way it was redrawn that they wouldn't have a good chance in that district, but maybe across in the House they would. So that is kind of really what threw the playbook out as it comes to, seeing who's going to be where. But the thing, even with all that redistricting, that remained the same is that we see an overwhelming Republican majority in each the House and the Senate.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. What are Republicans pushing for, and what are their chances of getting some of these things done? Because on the one hand, it would seem like their chances should be 100%, given how much control they have. But what are they looking to do?
We know in talking to Republican leadership this week is one of the things at the top of their list is property tax reform. Now, we don't really know exactly what that will look like or what that threshold will look like, but the way that they were kind of identifying it is that they see that so much of the focus or so much of the power has been more on the government and the local city, state side, that they want to see that just more, I guess, evened out and across the board so that, homeowners and property owners know what their value is, and it's kind of more of that even value. But that's one piece. The second piece, and it's going to be something that's familiar to a lot of people, is the school vouchers program. That was something that fell short in the last session. It was kind of running up into the wire. Just felt like there was not an agreement, between both chambers when it came to, what Republicans wanted in that program. But we're really hearing that this year that's going to be something that's going to be probably mostly taken the lead by Governor Kim Reynolds. And that it seems to me that the feeling that I'm getting is something that we can expect kind of in those early weeks in hearing from leadership on both sides, that that's something they really want to get done. It's been part of her platform that she has been, touting and pushing in a lot of past speeches. So I think we can expect, a big push on that in the front end of this session.
Democrats, on the other hand, obviously, probably a lot of hills to climb if they want to get something passed. Doesn't mean they can't just not propose bills and do the work of the body of legislators. What are they looking at this year?
So what they have identified are four key goals. They say really what this has come through is in the past months of going out and talking to Iowans, they say that this is what those Iowans have identified, as being important to them. So the first being, lowering costs for Iowans, investing in public schools, legalizing recreational marijuana, and then the fourth being that they want to protect reproductive freedom for all Iowans.
When you talked to leadership this week, any anecdotes that came out of that? Any sort of sense that you got about just what this year is going to look like?
One that sticks out to me, and you had mentioned or asked, how Democrats can get things accomplished. And then speaking with House Minority Leader Jennifer Confers, that's what she said. She said, "I'm not naive. I know that getting legislation that we want passed is going to be difficult, if not near impossible at some points. But that really, what she sees Democrats' role being in this state house is, being a voice for Iowans." Taking those things that they say that Iowans want, getting those introduced, kind of, being there to say no to some of the things that Republicans may be pushing for. So again, she knows, that the stack is there, the cards are stacked against them, but at the same time, wants to do their part. Meanwhile, obviously the Republicans are feeling, that they've got these 2 years to get things done. But really what I heard is that let's not just pass bills to pass bills. We've got these 2 years. Let's, have change and it be long standing change that we want to put in instead of just trying to get quick out, to just again pass bills to pass bills.
And this week, final question for you: the condition of the state is this week. Governor Kim Reynolds will be addressing the state. Do you know what she will be talking about and what her focus will be?
We don't really have, a clear picture of what she'll be talking about. But again, I think one of those key things we can really expect from this speech is going to be outlining, school vouchers. Again, the feeling I get from talking to Republican leadership, each side of the chambers have been really saying, Governor Reynolds is going to lead the charge on this. So I think that's kind of a clear, sneak peek that that's something that we can expect from her. Similarly to what we saw last year, where, in this speech is when she outlined her, tax relief and that flat income tax that was going to, be rolling over into the coming year. So I think that's really, going to be a huge part of that speech. And I also think, we've got the fetal heartbeat bill that's, she appealed that to the Iowa Supreme Court. Who knows if we can expect, any more of what she would like to see when it comes to reproductive, rights here in Iowa. I know the feeling I get from Republican leaders is they want to wait and see what that Supreme Court decision is before they would pass or introduce any legislation. But again, it's all up to that speech where we'll really get her pulse for what she's hoping to see out of both chambers. Again, with them having the majority as we go into this next session.
All right, Mary Sugden, we know you'll be busy over the next several months following a lot of this action and these bills, but we hope to touch base with you later this year and kind of see how things are going.
Great, looking forward to it. Thanks so much.